Hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast and drugs, addiction and dumb shit. And this is Ishmael. I wasn't. This is the second time I've been on a show, and I heard on face that some people didn't believe that was me on the first time. No, it was me. Really, unbelievable. That's me.
Doesn't pay to try. All the smart boys know why. It doesn't mean I didn't try. I just never know why. Feel so cold and all alone. Baby, you're not at home. Big deal, I'm still alone. Feel so restless I am. Beat my head against a pole. Try to knock some sense down in my bone. And even though they don't show, the scars are so old. And when they go, they let you know. You can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. You can't put your arm around a memory. Don't try. Don't try.
Welcome to Dopey, the podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. And I'm Dave, and I'm very excited. We have a very exciting guest, not in the way that I usually kind of march out some half-baked celebrity bullshit, but today we have a true, honest-to-goodness friend of the show. It was Chris's sponsor. It was my friend, Chris's friend, Dylan Woods. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave. Good to be here.
Well, you're not actually here. He's on the phone. He's someplace in Connecticut, and I'm someplace on Long Island. Huh?
Massachusetts.
Why did I say Connecticut? I said his name wrong, and now I said he's in fucking Connecticut. It's because you met Chris in Connecticut, right?
That's true.
And before we get started, I'm going to do the ads. I never do the ads with anyone on the phone, but I figured Dylan can pop in if he wants to say anything about these products that we get to advertise. And the first ad is from our friend Bob Forrest, and I want to just say that Dopey is brought to you by Aloe Recovery Center, located in sunny Southern California, in Silver Lake, and in Malibu. Aloe is an amazing place for addicts to go who need to get help. They have a staff of combined 675 years of experience treating addiction. Isn't that a lot?
That's crazy.
It's amazing. They have a multidisciplinary care team with a psychiatrist, master's and doctoral level therapists to treat co-occurring and underlying mental health problems, aka dual diagnosis. You with me here?
Yeah, man.
They use state-of-the-art pharmacology for their detox services, making their clients as comfortable as possible. And that was very important to me when I was all strung out on dope, to be as medicated as possible when I got to a place, right?
Get help.
Yeah, thank you. And they have these sick amenities, including surfing, horseback riding, your sponsor's favorite, sweat lodges, and the great sound bath meditations.
That's real.
Do you know what a sound bath meditation is?
I do, man.
Can you please explain it to me?
It's like, it can be done any number of ways. So it's like, actually, right before you called me, I was up in my little meditation room listening to samurai trap music, which is super similar to sound bath in that you have a lot of those kind of ancient Asian sounds that like reverberate, and the sound is not supposed to be. It like truly is super healing and calming and like an awesome meditation support.
Samurai trap music, is this a real thing?
Dude, I discovered this the other night. Me and this kid were going through YouTube. We found like samurai trap, jihad trap, Indian trap, Mumbai trap. Dude, basically any culture of all time now has its own trap thanks to globalization. Wow. And it's just incredible. I fucking love it.
And it gives you the same impact of sound bath meditation, you're saying?
Well, I mean, a sound bath practitioner might argue with that, but I think so, yeah. I think it does. There's like, I think it has to do with intention and then some type of environment and community. And yeah, dude, sound bath is awesome. Like gong baths also, I've done those where just like you're surrounded by these gongs.
Amazing.
A bunch of people like hitting the gong. Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, anyway, the most important thing to know about Aloe is that they treat their clients with respect, which as a clinician, you know that's the most important thing, right?
Yeah, man.
Fucking Aloe, like what Bob Forrest told me was that he went to 1 million treatment centers and he was never treated the way he would have liked to have been treated. So him and his buddy Evan and their buddy Bob got their shit together and created their own treatment where they treat people really well. And I have a friend who's over there, and he said they treated him really good. He said my ads were very legitimate, so I feel good about that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And then even more excitingly, our new sponsor. Now, if you were going to sponsor a show about drug addiction, what would you be? Like what would I be? Yeah, what do you think the most obvious sponsor for drug addicts in recovery is?
Drug addicts in recovery, Red Bull, Monster.
No, they don't have money like that. I'm gonna stop you. I'm gonna stop you right now. It's coffee, just coffee.
Oh, fair.
Yeah, it's the old school version of Monster. It's coffee.
It's true. It's my drug of choice.
There you go. You know, it's 9:38 at night, and I just had a cup of coffee, which I never do before I do Dopey. But I wanted to really bring it for you, Dylan. So I had a cup of Just Coffee, which was delicious. I like the dark roast, just so you know. Just Coffee Cooperative is a worker-owned coffee roaster dedicated to creating and expanding a model of trade based on transparency, human dignity, and environmental sustainability. They build long-term relationships with small-scale coffee growers to bring you a truly incredible cup of coffee. They practice justice from the grounds up. Get it? Because it's it's a delicious pun. Their website is justcoffee.com. I'm sorry, justcoffee.coop. And if you enter the coupon code DopeyPod or justcoffee.coop/discount/DopeyPod, you can get 30% off of all your coffee. Now, if you're a big fucking coffee drinker and a big Dopey fan, you should do this. You should go to justcoffee.coop/discount/DopeyPod because Just Coffee sponsors the show. So support them and drink coffee. And their coffee's really good, Dylan, just so you know.
I believe it, man.
They sent me some nice coffee. And maybe if you come to Long Island, I'll give you a cup of coffee.
I should, man.
Yeah, it'd be great. But anyway, those are the ads. Isn't that impressive?
Dude, honestly, like, I'm not kidding. That's super impressive. Good for you.
Thank you. I want to say, you know, Chris and I recorded Dopey for almost 3 years before he overdosed. And anybody who's not familiar, you know, there's people that listen to the show that never heard Chris on the show now, which is just weird. But I just want to bring everybody up to speed on what the hell this is, which is I met Chris in rehab, and years later we decided to do a podcast about the dumbest things we did using, which became kind of a podcast about recovery. And we did it for years, and Chris Chris was sober for a little bit longer than I was. He was, I think he had just about 4 years when he wound up relapsing and overdosing. And I met Dylan on the phone, and I heard so many things about you. It just chokes me up to even talk about it. That like I always wanted to get you on the show. I don't know why you didn't come on the show when Chris was alive, though. You came once.
I did a little bit. Yeah, I called in once.
You called him once, but I wonder, like, did you not want to do the show, or do you think Chris didn't want to have you on the show because he felt like you dwarf his drug stories? What do you think it was?
No, not at all. I don't know, man. I think, like, so he did. I know he was proud of it for sure, and I know he really loved it. He never like tried to pull anyone onto it though, ever. Not me, at least. And I don't even really remember him talking about it too much up here. Although at the same time, if he did talk about it, he was super pumped on it.
The funniest thing about Chris with Dopey was that I would tell people that Dopey was going to get big, and I would talk about it, but I would never tell anyone to listen to it. I would say, don't listen to it. And Chris would like get his family to listen to it. He would get everyone in Great Barrington to write reviews in the beginning. Like, he was obsessed with getting reviews, you know. And what he always said about you was... what he always said was he couldn't respect anybody that didn't have his kind of like crazy story when it came to using, which was that he was like a terrible alcoholic, plus he was addicted to heroin, plus he had IV coke, and he wouldn't respect anybody in recovery that didn't have those things. And then you came along and you had all those things.
Yeah, that was my... So, I mean, thankfully he matured out of that, like, opinion of kind of only listening to people with a evil or worse story than his. But, no, for sure, man, when we first met, I absolutely I heard him speaking, and I was like, that guy, I'm going to sponsor that guy. I love that guy. He's fucking crazy.
Well, tell me, what was the origin of you meeting Chris?
So I remember, I think it was probably like 2011. And I'm in a meeting, and some, like, another kind of this typical looking Boston kid, like you always said, is sharing a story. And I remember I came in late, so I kind of like, I'm sitting there as he's starting up. And like 10 minutes in, his story's like getting pretty wild. And I'm like getting very intrigued. And he starts talking about like, and then I turned 23 after he like broke his neck and escaped the prison and then went to prison.
Yeah.
And then was like doing, I love the variations of it too, or like the huge bandwidth in which he traveled. There'd be like these times in like a trailer park in Southern California, but then at the same time, he's also having private yoga teachers in like whatever the equivalent of Aloe is, you know?
Yeah.
So there's like, he was just so well traveled and well versed in the entire thing. And I wasn't nearly as well versed in like the treatment side of things as he was. But I think both of us love to kind of fuck around with the depravity of our lives, you know? And we had both like established kind of a footing, so.
So when you heard him speak in Great Barrington someplace at a meeting, he was like the speaker?
Yeah, I heard him speak in Northwest Connecticut, actually. So he was in like an extended care program down there or something, and I heard him speak.
And like, then did somebody introduce you? Did he go up to you? Did you go up to him? Like, what was the story?
I think I went up to him, and he was also, so there was this little pack of these early mid-20s guys kind of forming, and it was like, you know, like Colin, Ryan, all of them were kind of like congealing as a unit.
And
so
Ted.
It was like,
Ted.
Oh yeah, God,
yeah,
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had met Chris just, you know, I got into that mountainside like I'd say 2 weeks before Colin got there. So like I left, you know, so like it was just funny because I dropped out of there, and then Chris and Colin and Ted and Alex and that guy Andrew were all just like doing that phase 4, and then they moved into the sober living, and then like they were like, you know, because I don't think Chris really had so many close friends before that. I think like that was this amazing brotherhood for him, you know, like I think it really changed his life.
It absolutely did, especially like, so that I think it was, so Colin and Ted had to wait for Chris to leave that program before the three of them could get a house, and that was hinging, I'm pretty sure if I remember, like on Chris's parents, okay, that like Ted and Colin were safe enough to move in with. I mean, they'd seen such failures.
Right.
And so then the three of them moved in together, and that was like just this, that's about when I started sponsoring him, so probably like his like 8 to 10 months period.
The funniest thing about that is that Chris had been at Mountainside for like 6 months, and Colin and Ted had been there for like 6 weeks, and they're still waiting for him to get out.
I know. Well, dude, there was no time limit too long for that kid.
So how did you tell him about your own story? How much time do you have now, Dylan, by the way?
I'm December 07 sober, so 11 and something.
Wow, so 11 years, and you're my age, right?
I'm 40.
Oh, so you're younger than me. So you got sober when you were 29.
Yeah.
And were you somebody who relapsed a lot or no?
Yeah, my entire 20s was basically just like going into detox, doing okay for a second, trying out a different drug or a different method to try to drink safely, failing, starting a business, losing everything, building it back up, buying a house, losing that kind of stuff. It was just like erratic movements up and down. My whole 20s was that. Yeah, I could never string any recovery together.
Well, I'm very satisfied hearing about how you met Chris, because I never heard that little bit. But I would love to hear a little bit about your early story with drugs. Like, how did it start for you? How did it escalate? Give me the Dylan Woods story a little bit.
Sure, okay.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem, dude. So I grew up on Cape Cod, way out eastern Massachusetts. So like what I would consider, I mean, it was certainly like not the perfect childhood. We weren't like it was a pretty stable family, in case my mom listens.
Does your mom listen? Does your mom listen to Dopey though?
I think she probably did to a few.
She's like, I like cereal, I like This American Life, I like Wait, Don't Tell Me, and I like Dopey.
Dude, I got my therapist hooked on Dopey.
Oh my God, that's funny.
So anyway, I grew up in this, like, I have nothing to hang my early alcoholism on, other than like the whole typical, dude. I just felt like uncomfortable, and then when I drank, I felt like this perfect union with the universe and with my peers and my family, and everything was perfect, but that would wear off, so I'd drink more. And then at like 16 or so, I started like getting brought home by the paramedics and alcohol poisoning and that kind of stuff.
Right.
I suppose the abridged version is like, so my summer of between junior and senior year, I got in this car accident. Where I was driving to my buddy's house, and this kid ran out in front of me, and then I hit him with the car, and he died.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
how old were you when that happened?
16.
Oh my God. So you were 16 and you were drunk?
No, I wasn't.
Oh my God.
It was just like the most unfortunate event, and I knew the family, and they were like close friends of my friend who lived on that street.
Holy cow. Did you know the guy? How old was the guy who died?
11.
Oh my God.
It's the most tragic.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry that happened. Oh my God.
Yeah, dude. So, I mean, I know there's a big trend right now of trauma being the origin of addiction and alcoholism, and I do think there's some merit to that, but I have like a pretty established track record of misusing every substance that I can get my hands on.
Right. So it might have or might not have happened without this terrible trauma. But it couldn't have helped. It couldn't have helped anything, right?
No. I think if it did anything, I think the most impact it had is whenever I would wind up in front of somebody that was trying to help, that I would like immediately neuter whatever they had to say with like, you don't understand how I feel. You don't understand what's happening in my life. If you were me, you'd drink every day too. Like just pretty much saying fuck it constantly.
How long did that last for after the accident?
Until, well, I mean, I probably like mid-20s, I think.
And when did you discover drugs in the whole thing?
So it was like weed and alcohol and mushrooms and stuff through high school. And then right after high school, I actually ended up, so my senior year, I just couldn't deal with like sitting in class or high school. I don't know what was going on with me. I was suffering from like major trauma and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, what did the family of the kids say anything to you? Like, what did they say? How did they treat you? Like, what happened?
Pretty terribly, to which I do not blame them at all. So there was a lawsuit talking about like that because I had a reputation of like drinking a lot and doing a lot of drugs, that I should never have been able to borrow my parents' car.
Right, they assumed you were impaired when you were driving.
They did and they didn't. I think it was more about like just the origin of them like letting me use the car. So I was so irresponsible that I I shouldn't have been capable of driving a car, basically, even if I was sober. I was such a mess. It's kind of like what the
lawsuit said.
What the lawsuit said, yeah. So that was like brutal, and it kind of took our time. I grew up in a small town, so there was like some people that knew that family better, and they were kind of testifying on that side. Dude, it was awful, horrific.
Right. Did they stay in the town?
They were. So the Cape, similar to Long Island, is like a majority summer people, which they were. So
wow. So they went. Yeah. Oh my God, that's so crazy.
I mean, it's just horrible for everyone. I don't blame them for any reaction they might have had. You know, like of course, dude.
I don't know how I never heard this story before.
Yeah, I don't talk about it often, except when I'm on a fucking publicly broadcast podcast.
Yeah, when you're on a gigantic recovery podcast, you have to bring out all the terrible things in your life. But Dylan, I feel for you, man. Like, I mean, like, I don't know, like, if I don't know of any trauma I had in my life, and I wound up on heroin when I was 24. You know, like, your story makes a lot more sense than mine does, I have to say. How did you stumble?
It's so tempting to want to do that, isn't it? To, like, make a clean kind of draw a line between something that happened and my behavior later on. Which I get, there's definitely something there, but...
Right, I hear you. How did you... So when did you were just looking to get fucking wasted then? All forever after that.
So, yeah, I mean, I just, like, dropped everything. Dropped out of high school. And just drove west with like a pound of mushrooms and a pound of weed with this kid. I kind of talked into it, and we ended up, I think we were headed for Denver, but we kind of wound up like meeting some girls in Minnesota, and we stayed there for a while. And then finally made it to Denver, and then ultimately to Vail, where I lived for a couple of years. And that was just like, DUIs and fights, and like, I'm not a violent dude. I would just do stupid shit when I'm drunk, you know? So there's a lot of like...
Were you one of those kind of ski bums, like getting fucked up on the mountain kind of thing?
Absolutely.
That was what Todd's deal was. Todd moved out to Breckenridge one summer, and he just did that the whole summer.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal, man.
No, it sounded great, you know. Anyway, continue.
It would be great. Well, it kind of was great. I mean, it was probably... the height of my pure alcoholism. Cocaine was like way too expensive, so we do that like rarely, but basically it was just drinking into a blackout every night and smoking weed all day.
Right.
Which is like, you know, in retrospect, a lot less damaging than what would happen in the future, but you know, it was a lot of fun. But also, I can remember towards the end of that stint, starting to have like withdrawal symptoms from alcohol and just having like the most insane panic attacks and anxiety. And living in like a 2-bedroom place with like 6 dudes, and my house was like a fort under the coffee table, like just like the weirdest existence. And at that point, I didn't have a car anymore. I was like court dates and weird shit. I was in Eagle Court when Kobe got arrested, if you remember.
Yeah, he was there, right?
Yeah, dude. We were like, there's cameras everywhere.
So you're ski bumming it. Your alcoholism is totally getting established. I can only imagine Chris hearing these stories. You know, I can't even imagine how Chris responded to the death, because Chris like didn't cope with like major issues easily or well. And I can't even imagine, like I don't know, like I would assume he would tell me that story about you as like a defining moment, you know, but he left that out. Instead, he would always compare himself to you. And it just seems like not the story now that I'm hearing your story, which is interesting to me. Because, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of expected to hear a more similar story to his, but that's just funny, you know? It is what it is.
Yeah, no, for sure. And in some ways it is, in a lot of ways it's totally different. Like, I pretty much I would go home back to the Cape. I mean, it's a pretty good life, living in Vail in the winter, and then I go to Cape Cod in the summer. And it was just like, that's not bad. So I did that for a couple of years. And that's when I'd like see my folks and stuff. But other than that, like I was out of the house by 18. I would wind up back there, but you know.
And so what happened after that? I just love to hear this story. I don't mean. I hope I'm not boring you with it, telling your story. Dude. I think people will like to hear.
It's actually fun to be let through it. I appreciate it. So then I went back to the Cape and wound up like, okay, I got interested in like real estate and like trying to make money or like do something with my life at that point. I was like 22, 23. And I went and got a job at like this moving company. on the Cape, doing like moving and also doing sales. And then pretty shortly thereafter, I saw that you'd made like a ton of money if you got your license for like to drive the big rigs.
Right.
So I went and got that license and then became like an over-the-road trucker.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where did you truck?
Maybe like, so I was mostly like pretty much east of the Mississippi, but like everywhere, constantly back and forth to Florida.
So you were doing interstate truck driving?
Yeah.
Amazing. You know, it's funny. There's this guy, right? Dopey fan. He lives in California, in San Mateo, I think. And I think he works for Facebook. He hit me up because he wanted to like give something back to Dopey, and he set us up with these Dopey Facebook ads, and he put them out today. But when we were trying to figure out the audience, and there's something that Chris and I used to try to figure out, like, what do you have to be interested in to like Dopey kind of thing? And one thing that Chris always wanted to put in the description was truck drivers. Chris always assumed that truck drivers would love the show because they're driving and getting fucked up. How long were you a truck driver, Dylan?
So I did that from for that company from like 23 to 25.
Right.
Is that how? I can't remember exactly how it went. There was also a winter in there when I moved back to Colorado and wound up getting another DUI. And then this was the worst, dude. I got a DUI in Colorado, came back. And that company was like, okay, like you're a valuable asset, so we'll pay for you to fight that DUI and get it taken care of, resolved. We do that, and then 3 days later, I get in a fight in a strip club and get another DUI. It was just like that kind of shit over and over, like build it up and then crash it.
You were going super hard, you know.
Going super hard.
And when did you stumble into the harder drugs?
Well, so as I wound up, like as I left that company, or I can't even remember if I got fired or quit or whatever it was, I moved out to Phoenix, and that was kind of like, so when I lived in Phoenix, Scottsdale, that was like the absolute bottom of my alcoholic use. I was with like all these dudes who were like super Jersey Shore, like it was just gym, tan, laundry, clubs in Scottsdale, and that wasn't really my thing, but I kind of just went, you can get blackout drunk every night, so I did it.
Right.
And then I was like, I guess I was like 25 at that point, 24, 25, I can't remember. But so I got alcoholic hepatitis, basically, to where my liver was bleeding into my abdomen, and like my side was like all purple.
I feel like I heard this story. I think you told this story on Dopey years and years ago.
Yeah, I probably did.
And so you drank yourself fucking so sick that your inside showed on the outside.
That's right.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so then I went like that crew kind of, I think I freaked those people out because they went hard, but nothing like that. I mean, I was like, they would all go to Vegas for 3 days and I would just sit there and just drink bottle after bottle. Sometime at that period, once I started to really get drunk, I could not stop. Like nothing would stop me.
Right. So
I was losing jobs. At that point, I'm like running a piano moving company. And my job was to like drive to Compton and pick up all these Yamaha pianos and then distribute them throughout Texas.
And you were running the whole thing, and you couldn't stop drinking, and you couldn't stop driving.
Yeah, dude, it was the worst. Because once you kind of choose to be a driver, that's like what your thing is, dude. You know what I mean? So I'd be going through DTs, driving from Phoenix to LA, just like with no AC in this stupid fucking truck, and just like sweating and like hallucinating and hearing voices. And then getting there, getting a hotel, getting blackout drunk, and then waking up super early and feeling like shit, and then doing it all over. It was just awful period.
Through all that time, were you haunted by the accident? Like, or did you suppress it? Like, do you remember?
I definitely had like nightmares, but I think I did a really good job of suppressing it. So it wasn't a conscious, I need to be blackout drunk not to think about this trauma. It was a much more of just like, I was still trying to paint the picture that I just love the party. And then I was just like, that was my thing. I was just always drunk and like, I'm good at that. So that's my identity or whatever.
Right. It was so deep that you didn't even know you were medicating that thing.
No, dude, I wouldn't let it go there. That's too much.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I lived in Florida for a year in like treatment. You know, I went to Renaissance in Florida and in Boca Raton and or Delray or whatever. And I had a job moving furniture, right? And I drove the truck. and within like a day of driving the truck, I like hit an overpass. I fucking hit a wall. I think I hit a car, and they said I wasn't allowed to drive again, and so I had to move stuff, and I would just be the mover on the truck. So like we had a kind of parallel thing, except I was such a terrible driver because I grew up in Manhattan that they wouldn't let me drive the truck, and I was sober for that. I just am a terrible driver.
Dude, I get it, man. Driving in Manhattan is terrifying, driving trucks.
Oh, man. I had to drive a truck once in Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles, and I actually moved in with Todd, and I got a job as a PA. And I had to drive one of those tractor trailers from Hollywood to, like, Burbank at the top of the hill. And I was high on crystal meth driving this ridiculous truck. I think I was calling Todd, just telling him how scared I was and that I shouldn't be driving this truck. And, like, I would be driving and be like, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. And it would be just terrifying stuff. That was like, I never should have driven professionally. But it sounds like you were a good driver. You seem like the kind of person that could handle being a professional driver.
I did it a lot. I was good at it. Also, so towards the end, it got scary as I would be like driving the thing, coming out of a blackout and be in DC, going like 25 miles an hour, straddling the white line. Like, that was scary shit, you know?
Yeah.
Going over to, like, an Olive Garden at 11 a.m. to get blackout drunk. Interesting. You know what? Only thing that saved me during that time was Stern, actually. I was listening to Howard Stern, like, every day at that point.
Yeah.
There's something, like, tethering about that. I don't know what it was.
What years was that?
That was probably, like, 03, 04.
They were still great years then. I mean, like, the show was still good then. I think that was before Artie attempted suicide, right? That was when Artie was still alive, I think, or still on the show.
Yeah. No, that gets even deeper with when my drug use got out of control. There was like still some Artie connections going on.
So let me hear about it.
Well, let's go. So past that point, whatever. I realized that I can't drink safely at all. Period. Ever. And it was just real, like, so several detoxes come out of that whole period. But I'm coming back to Cape Cod to, like, do whatever. I don't even know what I'm doing. And somebody, some night, somewhere, slid me an Oxy 20. And I took it and was like, holy shit, I can quit drinking.
Right.
And that's how I quit drinking.
Wow. So the second you had an opiate in you, had you been doing coke or anything before that or no?
Yeah.
All the time?
So I'd be like, well, sniffing it for sure, yeah.
Right.
So I'd be like sniffing coke here and there and like, I maybe smoking, I can't remember.
What was the lifestyle like on the road though? You're driving pianos from fucking Compton to Texas, you said?
Yeah.
What was the lifestyle like? Where would you sleep? You slept on the truck?
So I would sometimes, yeah, because you can like, at that point, I would have like an allotment for money to get a hotel, and I would just like spend that at the bar and then sleep in the back of the truck. That one was like the most, so that whole like Cali to Texas, that was the tamest road life I ever had. The other ones, so like that first one I mentioned with you, I would hire this kid who was like the only kid that like sits right in the me and Chris category, my other childhood friend Chris. I would bring him on the road with me, and we just like, that was really fun. So we'd just be blackout drunk in Atlanta, work for 20 hours, and then go get like blackout drunk in Nashville, and then work again, and like we were just traveling and having a blast. You can do that when you're 22, you know? Right. So that lifestyle road was actually really, really fun. It was super short-lived, but it was unsustainable, but it was really fun while it lasted.
It was the innocence of adventure and the joy of getting fucked up before the consequences come.
Dude, totally. And to be like 22 in my first job, that like my boss doesn't know where I am or doesn't care where I am. I'm totally self-sufficient, autonomous, and like
you're making money, you're free.
Yeah.
No, I got you.
Incredible.
Yeah, I got you.
It was a cool time. So me and that kid later would have like some darker stories. But
where were you when they slipped you the Oxy?
I think I was just at like some house party, and some girl gave it to me.
Okay.
And then I remember calling her the night. I don't think I got sick, but I think I got super fucked up in a really good way. I'd taken it before. I'd taken like Vicodin and Perks and like kind of just like whatever anybody had around. I'd take them sometimes. Something happened at that point in my life when I was like so afraid that I wasn't going to be able to drink anymore. It was just so detrimental that finding the Oxy at that moment was just like the most amazing moment of my life.
Right. It was the now you have arrived moment.
Big time, dude.
I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
So then what happened?
So, I mean, then I did them every day, quickly.
Immediately you found a source and and you were just taking it orally every day.
No, I don't think I think I took it orally one time and then I was sniffing it every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you doing it alone? Did you have somebody you were doing it with? Was there a little group of people? What was it like?
So I was like a little of both. I was more of a lone drug user. My whole thing was I wanted to use drugs to create emotional homeostasis so I could go out and like work a job and move forward in life.
Right.
I wasn't really trying to to die or to like totally hide from the world. I mean, during that time, so I did Oxys for a couple of years, probably from like 2000, end of 3 or something, maybe 4 to like 2005-ish. And during that time, I started a company. I started my own trucking company, bought a couple trucks, bought a house, was just like dominating the region I was in the industry we were in, like doing incredibly well. I could work 20 hours a day. It was like that perfect drug that would wake me up better than coffee, and it would put me to bed better than anything else. It was like everything I ever wanted it to be.
Right.
It was perfect.
And how long do you think that? I mean, I had a similar experience when I started, sniffing heroin in the beginning. Like I did it while I was doing production, and I had like a year where it did everything I needed it to do.
Yeah, that's about right. A year.
So maybe a year and a half, I felt like I was somebody, but I was trying to achieve the same sort of homeostasis of fear and needing to be comfortable in every situation, like really wanting that. And when was the first time you think you didn't have it?
Oh, dude, so I was on a trip down to, I think, Jacksonville working. And I got down there and I was like, I just don't feel right. Like, what's going on? Like, I'm totally clueless about the sickness. And then I called this kid and he's like, yeah, man, you're dope sick. And I was like pissed, but also totally one track mind. Like, all right, well, I guess what you do is just do it constantly. So I remember like I had to deliver some hot tub in like South Florida, and I dropped that off and just drove straight back 26 hours to the Cape and got my dude at like 4 a.m.
Right, and you're like sick behind the wheel kind of thing?
Dude, the worst. Yeah, man. I don't know if you remember those old like yellow jackets and like weird over-the-counter stimulants in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I mean, we just did this. The only one I did like that was ephedrine in upstate New York. Me and Todd would take them constantly, but I'm listening.
Yeah, so I just did that the whole way back and was like shaking, crying, and just feeling so awful.
It's terrible. But that was the first time you were in withdrawal. So that was the first. So like, did you just imagine that the second you sniffed the Oxy, you would feel better without ever having experienced that, right?
Yeah, so I think I did. I didn't realize. No, I totally had faith in that, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it was like that was the goal. Not getting help or not going to treatment or not any other solution other than like, I need more of that right now.
And so you drove across the country, got back to your Oxys, and felt better, got well.
Yeah. And just kind of like continued business as usual, like that wasn't a thing, And then realized I need to be more responsible about how that went down, obviously. I could never be away from it for that long again. I
feel like that's like the most... I mean, that's like the weirdest and almost most profound moment for an opioid addict is when they get sick and then they do dope or oxys or whatever their opiate is, and they get well. Like, it's such a fucked up thing, right? That you can get so sick and then you do this thing and you feel so good. Like, I remember so many times being so sick and needing to cop and or being sick at a spot, copping and using at the spot and feeling so good on my way home. It's just such a strange, almost like science fiction phenomenon. It's just so fucking weird.
Dude, how about feeling like almost entirely better just when you get the text that it's going to happen?
Oh, yeah. What is that
How
about?
odd is that, dude? I don't know, man. I'd be like feeling so sick, and then I get a text. Even if it's going to be an hour from now, that's fine, dude. I can deal with that. And I feel like 60% of my symptoms are gone. That is so weird.
It's really weird. I mean, are there probably studies on that? Are there studies on that?
Dude, I don't know, man. There's got to be. There's clearly a huge part of being in withdrawals. I mean, if I'm like totally honest with myself, it was awful. I mean, the sleep stuff was like just terrible. But it wasn't as bad as I imagined it to be. It wasn't as bad as to make me go on for 3 years almost dying constantly. Like, it wasn't that bad. But the fear of having to live like a sober life, that was bad. Just like the knowledge that I'm going to have to face all the wreckage I've caused and all the stupid decisions and just like to live a raw life, that was like a majority of my like impetus to keep going, you know?
Do you think it was the fear of the sober? I mean, I think for me, it was more the enjoyment of being high and like, just like I think it's the same thing. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be sober. Like I couldn't imagine that the world was an okay place to be if I wasn't lubricated, if I wasn't like high, you know? It's like, but I don't know if it was that I couldn't face, you know, the life on life terms thing, or like I just didn't want to stop using. You know what I mean? Like, how do you really quantify that kind of question?
Yeah, dude, I know, man. I think it's obviously a combination of the two.
Yeah.
You know?
So how did it escalate to like fucking total wall to wall shooting everything debauchery?
I mean, pretty quickly as I look back on it. I mean, there's a similar story to like everyone's where. Also, while I was in it, I remember getting 80s for like $20. Like, it wasn't a big deal early on, and then I think I was right in the middle of the upswing. So towards the end of it, people were like, "Yeah, dude, I got $180, $100," and I'm like, "Dude, fuck."
Right. It's like, what
it was
the
just
fuck?
Dude, it was impossible. And that's when I can't remember. Like somebody obviously, like I denied it before when someone's like, "I don't have 80s, but I asked for dope," and I'm like, "Nah, man, fuck that." You know, that like there's a huge difference. Well, there is today, but there didn't used to be as much.
Right.
So I don't know. I came one time and I sniffed it. I did the whole I sniffed it for 3 days, and then of course I was super curious as to like what everybody else was doing. So one day I just gave this dude my arm and looked the other way.
Right.
And then that was it. It's hard to go back after that.
Yeah. I hear you. I did it in the same way. I think I was in treatment. I was in treatment in upstate New York in a 28-day place with this guy. And that guy would have been the most amazing Dopey guest. He would tell me stories about like stealing Similac from the supermarket and then returning it like in the same hour to get money to cop dope. And he would tell me these stories every night, and I would always just think this guy's the most interesting guy I've ever met.
Yeah.
And
dude.
He convinced me to leave treatment. And I was like, I have an apartment in Manhattan, and I have money, you know. And so we left and we went to my apartment and we got dope. And he's like, I'm not sniffing it. He was like, I'm shooting it. And I was with him, and he was like, you're a fucking idiot if you sniff it. And I was like, I think I had shot it once before with this woman, and I basically overdosed the first time I shot up with this woman, and then the guy shot me up, and I didn't sniff again after that, just because of like money and the effectiveness, and you don't want to lose any of it, and you just get it's, you know, it just hits you.
Dude, totally. I remember knowing that like the percentages of intranasal versus intravenous, and like realizing that you're saving like X amount of dollars by doing it. Yeah, it's prudent. It was very financially responsible. And
in that point, did you still have your business? Did you have the trucking business? Like, when did all that shit start to phase out?
Yeah, I did. I'd say for about a year as I was shooting, I still had the business. And of course, there was like so many signs, but I kind of took myself from being director of operations and back on the trucks. I was like, I just need to do all the long haul stuff. And I had a business partner at the time. But I was like, you stay here and do this stuff with your family. I'll go on the road and do all of that. So I would just go on the road and take that kid again, Chris, and we would just go out with like as much drugs as we could get before we left, and inevitably run out, and then it would just be debauchery as I tried to drink myself from being dope sick, and like that whole gamut. So that went on for about a year until he realized it was like $50K missing from our joint account.
Right.
And then I kind of just, I went to like one last detox and then never came back.
Can you remember, Dylan, on that road trip with your buddy Chris, any like ridiculous story of that? I mean, that sounds like the craziest circumstance I ever heard. Like you and another dope, heroin addict getting on a truck to move furniture. You know what I mean? Like it's just such a recipe for disaster and or amazing dopey stories. Like,
okay. During that like 6-month period, there's 3 of those that are just all equally. There's like this crazy 5-day crack run in Jacksonville. There's
what happened? Give me some of the highlights. Yeah.
Okay. So we realized I can't remember how much we had, the two of us. Do you talk specifics about like drugs, or is it triggering, or like what?
No, we talk specifics about everything.
Okay, so we had like a half a stack or something, like 5 bundles. And we're going to go down to Florida for like 3 days, deliver a bunch of stuff, pick some other stuff up, and come back. Not a huge deal.
So 5 bundles between the two of you, and you drive down to Florida.
Yeah, makes sense, right?
Uh-huh.
You use the app, you're like, okay, whatever, we're not going to be like wrecked the whole time, but we shouldn't be sick, that's fine.
Yeah.
And we're also, of course, like with the motivation to kind of take it easy and back off a little bit, just some maintenance. We don't need to party. It's not about that. It's about working and making money,
And about not getting sick,
Yeah, it's about not getting sick. So we make it to like South Carolina, I think. North Carolina, on our way down. North Carolina is like the last bags we shoot in like a truck stop bathroom or whatever we're fucking doing. And then it becomes like the hunt. So as soon as that last bag's done, it's like, okay, we're clearly not making it. We have like a ton of work to do. How are we going to get right?
Wait, so you leave, where did you drive from?
From outside of Boston.
So you leave Massachusetts with 4 bundles for the trip to Florida, and when you get to North Carolina, you're shooting your last bag.
Yeah.
That's hysterical in itself. So what happened?
Yeah. Because then, you get kind of lower, and you're like, dude, I've heard there's a ton of dope down south. Like, we'll be totally fine. And I've made stuff happen before down there, but it's not easy. And anyway, so we get to North Carolina, and then we're like, all right, so now it's on. We're going to every city and trying to get dope. And the thing is, down there, by the way, there's like a linguistic barrier to where dope means crack.
Right.
And so we can, and even when you can we're like, no, we need that, that boy, that we need that brown, that whatever.
Yeah.
They'd be like, oh, okay, totally. And then crack is like 20 times easier to find, so they bring back crack.
Yeah. They bring back brown crack, right?
Dude, what are you going to do? You're holding on to this homeless dude's bike so he doesn't fucking keep your $18 or whatever it is. So you just fucking smoke it, and then all of a sudden it becomes a crack run.
Right.
But those crack runs where you're starting to get sick, dope, it's just
terrible.
Oh, dude. So if you can drink enough and smoke enough, you can kind of stave it off for 10 minutes at a time, but there's no way that's a permanent solution. So I'm just my buddy Chris is actually way more into shooting and smoking coke than I was, and he was just as happy to shoot coke than he was to shoot dope. So he was kind of whatever, man, I'll just shoot crack for the next week. That's fine.
And the withdrawal didn't really hit him?
Dude, he was weird. He ended up getting sober 2 years after I did, but he, until the very end, was one of those weird, the unicorn of he could shoot for 3 days and then take a couple days off and then not do it, and then he never had a habit until the very end.
That's what Todd was like, except Todd didn't shoot. Todd would just do 2 or 3 days a week, and then he wouldn't use, and he would just drink bottles of water with lemon in it, and he would just talk shit about my addiction, and he went on like that for 20 years. And I mean, it's just crazy. Anyway, so you're on this fucking trip. I mean, did you wind up... I mean, in my situation like that, I would figure out a way to get dope or pills. Did you wind up getting them, or did you get sick? What happened?
So I got sick, and we wind up so we're just getting, I think we get crack in Charleston, South Carolina. We get crack in Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
And then we get to Jacksonville, which I'm like, dude, this has to be... We have to be able to get it here. So we kind of just park the truck. We're in this super seedy motel in the worst part of town. And I was calling my girlfriend. I had like the sweetest, nicest girlfriend at the time. She was like non-drug addict, just like super nice, supportive, like the girl, like an amazing woman. And so I'm talking to her on the phone, like, all right, babe, like, yeah, things are good. I'm just going to, go to bed now. And like, as I was just gearing up for a crack run. And Chris runs in the hotel room with like these 3 kids from the street, like on him. I can't remember if they had a gun or not, but it was like super aggressive and a lot of yelling. And they were like roughing Chris up and trying to get us to give him money. And my girlfriend's like, what the fuck is that? And I just turned my phone off. And then we kind of like talked them down and ended up just buying a ton of crack. They couldn't get heroin. So we just bought a ton of crap, but they kept leading us on to like, no, dude, I think we got a guy coming through that'll have dope soon, that'll have heroin soon. And so we just kept on going like that, dude, for like 5 days. And we got separated in the middle of it, and it was like I came out of a blackout at one point in like an entirely other part of Jacksonville, having pissed myself naked in this hotel room. And I kind of turn over and like look behind me, and there's this crazy looking dude. I would later realize this dude named Wolfie that had just been released from prison that morning, and he was getting a blowjob and smoking crack, and it was like dawn. And I hit myself, and then his lady of the night like came over to me and put the stem in my mouth, and I hit that, and she's like trying to snuggle, but I'm like fucking pissed myself, just like so gross. I stagger into the bathroom. And I'm just looking at myself in the mirror like, dude, what? I have no clothes. I have no idea where I am. I have no cell phone. I have no money. I did have a credit card still in my piss-laden shorts.
Oh, my God.
That apparently I had used to buy, like, this entire homeless crew rooms at the hotel we were in.
So you bought, like, a wing of the hotel for this homeless crack-smoking crew.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then Wolf, I can't remember his name. Chris would remember. He was just like this dude was so fucking crazy. He pulled a gun on me in the middle of I-95. And, but anyway, he's going around. He's like, dude, I got heroin over here, but it would just be more crack dealers everywhere we went, dude. Just the craziest crack run. And I'm like pounding beers and vodka in between as we're supposed to get it. I lost my buddy Chris for like a couple days. Meanwhile, my girlfriend and my boss and the customers were supposed to be working for it. I have no idea where I am. And so like all that anxiety is just eating on me. And every time I take a hit, it's like 3 seconds of decent, I guess, forgetting. But then you're like instantly drawn back into like how bad you're fucking your life up. It was just miserable. So then I finally get Wolfie to bring me back.
Bring you back where, though?
To the hotel, to the original hotel where Chris had been waiting for me for days now.
Right. And what was he up to? He was shooting coke by himself?
He was smoking crack with his whole crew. He moved like half the street into our hotel room.
He had like gotten married. He like knocked up some crack whore down there. He like had patio furniture and shit, chilling, waiting for you to come back. No.
Dude, basically, he was also dealing with my girlfriend calling the hotel room constantly, and he couldn't move because he didn't have a credit card, so he was just like there with the phone unplugged with like 6 or 7 homeless people.
How old were you? How old were you at the time?
26, 27.
And the homeless crew was mostly, how old were they? Mostly older, same, just a bunch of like fucking ragged, crusty sort of punky types.
Yeah, like 40 to 50, probably.
Right, amazing. So you guys were like the golden children for these people that came with all this money, that could float all this crack. Oh my God. And did you ever wind up finding dope on this adventure?
Not on, dude, I don't think I did. That was our last attempt. We finally had like gotten the go from my boy Blue and Black, these 2 dudes who were going to take me over to this place. And as soon as we pull out of the motel, we get pulled over. When we get yanked out, and they're like looking at me. Like back then, I was like lifting a lot, and I had like a short haircut. I probably looked like quasi-military. Right. And they're like, dude, what are you doing here? And they put me in the back of the car anyway. Dude, while I was in the back of the cop car, my dude Blue, who I just met, stole my wallet out of my pants. So they put us in the cop car, and they take us out to search us again. And they're like, why do you have his wallet? And I'm like, yeah, dude, Blue, what the fuck? Why do you have my wallet? And he's like, all right, man, yeah. And
oh my God.
classic institutional racism. He arrested those two dudes and just told me to get the fuck out of there.
Well, maybe if Blue hadn't stolen your wallet while in custody, he wouldn't have gone. That might have been the thing that got you released.
It might have been, dude. It might have been.
That's fucking crazy. So do you remember? So what happened next?
So then I think I gave this dude my credit card. In the middle, at dawn, he was going to go, you know that scam where, not scam, whatever, where you stand by the pump and you offer to pay for the gas and
sure.
the cash?
Yeah.
So he was going to go do that for a couple hours and then get some more crack. But he took off. So then it was no more card, no more anything. And I think we just soldiered on, dead, so dope sick and strung out, and we just made those deliveries. And
so through all this, you have a truck full of furniture?
Yeah, dude, with customers, they were like, "Where's my shit? We just moved down here. We're staying in a hotel, waiting for our daughter's clothes." Yeah,
this could be the greatest drug addict road movie ever. Dude,
there's ones that are worse than that, more depraved.
Well, I think I can only handle the one right now, but maybe I think only you could only handle telling the one. That's fucking a really, really wall-to-wall dopey story. And
it was.
See, whenever I was in a situation like that, I couldn't handle coke without dope. I just couldn't handle it. I think I always figured out a way to get dope, and I wouldn't even want to do the coke because it'd just be too nasty for me. I just couldn't handle the chemistry of it.
Dude, me neither. I was not handling it, but it was the only option.
Yeah, it's so funny.
You know what I mean? It's no, it's just dude, I would run into the bathroom every time and just to look at my eyes and my pupils and just to just almost marinating in how much I hated myself.
Right.
You know what I mean? There was no crack run ever had any glamour in it. Some smoking some good coke had a couple decent hours, but dude, that was just the saddest, sickest time.
Right.
It's hilarious now. So thank God that kid's sober. We joke about it all the time.
It is hilarious, and it is equally tragic because there's a million people out there right now doing that, and you don't know how many people are going to make it back. How long did it take you to go from that to day one?
So there's another that was when I had everything going still. So there was a couple more of those type of things where I think the last truck road, I ended up injuring my ankle while I was shooting and got this really crazy infection where my dad came over and he's like, "Dude, you have a fever of 106 and you rushed me to the ER, and they had to put a PICC line into my heart to give me antibiotics because it was whatever, so shady." And that was the beginning of the end. Right. And then
what was the infection from?
I don't even know, man. I mean, I was not careful with what I used for water,
right?
For sure, spit or pond water or an old fucking Coke.
So you were one of these people. That was one of the funniest things for me with Chris was that he would talk about that when he didn't have water, that he would spit in his hand and try to draw it up.
Yeah, dude.
And you did that too?
Yeah.
And it worked?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I imagine it's not isn't there something legend about how our mouths are the dirtiest thing ever?
Yeah.
Isn't that So anyway, I sprained my ankle, so there was a bunch of swelling, meaning probably blood flow wasn't super good. I probably shot something and introduced some weird something into my body. And I didn't even take care. It was I tore a ligament. It was a pretty bad sprain, but I remember just duct taping a shingle to it and going about my life.
Wow.
And then my ankle actually started to got so swollen, the skin started to crack. And then I went into Boston Medical for a couple weeks where they did the surgery with the PICC line.
What is a PICC line?
A PICC line is they use it for a constant delivery system for antibiotics or anything else, basically to your heart. So the big thing with osteomyelitis is that it can infect the heart, and then at that point you're it's not good. I'm not sure if it's a death sentence, but it's not good at all. So the idea is 4 times a day you have to screw this thing onto your bionic vein and then inject antibiotics and in some kind of sterile water or something to push it through.
Wow.
Which you can mix heroin into.
Is that what you did?
Yeah.
So were you adding the dope to the IV bag or whatever?
Yeah, so I'd like to the antibiotics. So I'd add coke and dope to the antibiotics and then shoot it.
We just had a dude on the show tell a similar story about that. What would it drip? Would it drip in from the bag into your heart, or you would shoot it?
No, you shoot it. So it's like a screw-on thing. So you literally screw it into your vein, basically. Your vein has a little port going out of it.
Oh, my God.
And that is pushed through up your arm, through your chest, to, like, millimeters from your heart. That's the idea. Is, like, you want the antibiotics, like, kind of showering the heart, I guess.
Right.
I'm not a doctor, but that sounds roughly what they said. So then I figured, like, I've never shot coke or heroin into my heart before.
And you were like, I'll never have this opportunity again. I need to take this opportunity.
Yeah. So I had that same kid, Chris. I had someone there. I was like, dude, I have no idea what's going to happen. So just watch me. And I did it, and it was different. Not like super amazing or anything, to be honest, but it was different than like sensations I'd felt before.
So you were laid up in the hospital, right? You were laid up. You had the PICC line in your heart for antibiotics to keep you alive, and you called up Chris. And this is not.
Sorry,
huh?
It's not in the hospital. So this is after I got released. You have to have. So for some infections, you need to have that PICC line in for like sometimes months.
At home.
Yeah. So I was at home. I was like on crutches with my I had like a bunch of bones, like a fair amount of bone removed from my ankle because it was so infected. And then, so that's when I was like on crutches, just like about town, just being a complete fool because I was also prescribed methadone and Dilaudid and Xanax. And so just like a complete blackout disaster.
Wow. That's serious. I mean, they prescribed you methadone and Dilaudid at the same time?
Yeah.
What could the explanation for that be? You're just in a lot of pain.
Yeah, I think it came to light that I was an addict during that because I remember getting out of surgery and just like wailing with like the most pain. I mean, they'd like cut in, they'd like fix some tendons and remove some bones. So it was like a significant surgery. Probably not the most painful, but it like hurt a lot. And like because I'd been using so much painkillers and heroin that whatever they gave me wasn't working
at all.
So they quickly, and I had like track marks, dude, and I was like, I just looked fucked up, you know? So I think they deduced that I was a heroin addict. They had a social worker talk to me like 5 minutes, but then I think they were actually pretty kind in I don't know if kind's the right word, but they kind of took that into account.
They were sympathetic and they prescribed you methadone.
Yeah, either that or like we don't ever want to hear this kid call us again. So here's some kind of drugs, get out of here.
No, I think that's an interesting thing with the medical community, and I think it probably changed, but I'm not even sure. I remember like if I had this crazy seizure, and I was very close to death, and the cops had to come take me out of the house. And when I woke up in the hospital, I told them I was an addict, and they immediately prescribed me methadone and benzos because I was in benzo withdrawal. And I think that happened a bunch of times to me in a hospital situation. They're not like you have to get clean. They like want to make sure you don't go into withdrawal.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. You're a huge pain in the ass. And I mean, benzo withdrawal is super dangerous. So
I know.
You can't play with that.
I had seizures all over the place from benzo withdrawal. Everywhere I had seizures everywhere.
Dude, I didn't get into benzos. What wasn't my thing?
Fucking, I have to say, like, I was like, I'd say pot was my favorite drug in the end, like just as an identity drug, and heroin, obviously, like I was completely addicted to, and I loved how heroin made me feel, and then I loved all the aspects of heroin, the ritual and the shit and everything, until I fucking didn't need it and hated it, but was still totally addicted to it. But with benzos, I was such a fucking neurotic person that benzos was like the most obvious drug for my brain. It just fit me like a glove, like, I wish I hadn't, because benzos make you slow and fat and stupid, and I got so addicted to them,
Yeah, dude, they made you so oblivious, which I guess is what you were going for. But like oblivious in a way I didn't like.
Oh, I really, really, really liked it, and I also would.
Don't get me wrong. I always had a bottle with me.
Right, but it wasn't
like somewhere hidden as a parachute, but.
I remember, and this is a fucked up story. When Linda, my partner, was pregnant, and she was like near giving birth, I would call Todd and send him. He had found a Xanax dealer named Phoenix in Union Square. And I would send Todd to score Xanax for me while I was at the hospital with Linda.
Oh, dude.
Until Todd was like, I'm not going. So I remember going out in the snow to find Phoenix, who was this like character, this old black guy who just always had Xanax and always had something nasty to say. But like, you know how that is. Like I wish like I could meet these people sober and kind of make sense of their story. But when you need them so badly, you have no idea what their story is. Anyway, I want to know how, like, because now you're like a spiritually sound, helpful person, like a leader in your community. You work in treatment. You have people working for you. You obviously sponsor people. Like, what was the turning point?
So I guess the following year to what we've been talking about, a couple just even worse, horrific stories. We'll save for another day. Go down. I wind up going to treatment in North.
What was the worst one? What was the worst one?
It's a tie probably between escaping a psych ward in Daytona Beach and driving from Boston to Arizona with that PIC line in, just drinking and doing methadone the entire way and trying to like break into hospitals, and then eventually just doing a ton of Percocet 5s and cocaine to where my body started to like shut down.
Did you break into any hospitals?
No. I just kept going into like I keep pulling off exits where there might be a hospital, and I would just like be milling around and like talking to people about like, is this a place that would prescribe? Just like constantly casing everything and like on the hunt for methadone.
Right.
When I ran out like Louisiana, not Louisiana, like Oklahoma or something.
Yeah, save the best one, because we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Like you're. I have to say, Dylan, you know, it's been a little while since we've had anything like this on the show. So I know that you're probably feeling weird about it, but just know that you're doing a service to the Dopey Nation. The Dopey Nation needs real Dopey stories, and this is, you know, you're delivering. But now I want to get to the part where you have some, some positive fucking, transformation or something. Good.
All right. I'm proud to be part of the nation. So more failed attempts at treatment. I finally did like an actual inpatient treatment. Thought I had it licked. Relapsed again. Overdose, psych ward, felony arrests, all kind of crazy shit.
Right.
And then in 2007, towards the end of it, I overdosed one last time. Went into that treatment center again. I had no money, but that guy let me in. Tim let me in if I would work like manual labor every day. That was like my penance or like my payment. So I'd be like shoveling snow.
Was it at Mountainside?
Yeah.
Holy shit. The funniest thing is, like, when Tim comes on Dopey, you're like, tell me the worst thing you did. He's like, well, I drank a lot and took mushrooms by the fire. You know, it's like, your story is like, oh my God. It's so funny, right?
Dude, I know. Well, I got like 7 years on him as far as like, he got sober so young.
I know. And he's
he was like a crack guy too. I think he's got some stowed away.
He didn't want to bring it then. You know, it's funny.
No. Yeah, well, it's interesting.
He's all grandmother ayahuasca and adventure shit. You're all, it's funny. I love that.
Yeah, we're different.
So he takes you into Mountainside. He says,
he took me in.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was like, he'll take me in for as long as it takes for me to get into like a local sober house, which was like 12 or 13 days.
Well, how did you get there in the first place? Like, how did you find out about it?
Mountainside?
Yeah.
I had gone there in May of that year, so that's the one inpatient I'd done. Dude, there was one, like, family spiritual guy had mentioned to my mom, like, hey, there's this place out there. Back then, it was like a .org, like, barely a couple grand a month. And so I went there, but I just didn't take it seriously, as I said. Like, I didn't understand powerlessness. I didn't understand any higher power concept. I just didn't get it. I was also, however, introduced to like a community of people who are kind of psyched on being sober, so that meant a lot to me. And that's why I went back to that community later on, because in the meantime, I drove to Colorado, and that's where I had like the overdoses and all that crazy shit going down. But anyway, me and this kid drove back from Colorado, and I had nowhere to go, so I just had to drop me off in Canaan.
Wow. So you like come back and Tim's like, I'll put you up, but you have to start working for it kind of thing?
Yeah, but not. So it took me like a month to get there because I still was under the impression that if I was in the proximity to those people, I would be fine. But I overdosed again, and that's when I wound up in a psych ward for the last time. And then that's when Tim took me in after that last overdose, which was in Connecticut.
Did you seek him out, or did he seek you out?
No, I totally sought him out. I think my mom called. And like begged him to like do something, and then he kind of caved and let me in there for a couple days. So super kind.
Yeah,
my life.
Amazing. And he probably saw in you what you saw in Chris.
Dude, maybe so. We'd only had like a couple interactions when I was inpatient last time. But yeah, dude, we jived, and I definitely took a lot from his wisdom at that point. So, I mean, yeah, dude, who knows? And then later on, we become much closer. But at that point, I was kind of a stranger, but maybe he saw something. Right.
So you wind up getting into treatment, and like, when did it become like? When did 12-step stuff become like attractive to you? Like, what did it take for that to change?
So I did that stint. I was like opening up more. I tried meditating, but when I was in there and I had like some actual profound experiences through meditation or hyperventilation, I'm not exactly sure what it was in retrospect, but I had like feelings of being connected and at peace sober when I was in Mountainside for that 12 days. So I came out with like a resolution that at least I wasn't going to do anything stupid right away. And then like 6 weeks into being at that sober house, I was taking a nap one day, and the sober house manager like came and woke me up and was like, "Hey, do you care to tell us why there's like state police surrounding the house right now?" And I've like failed to tell her that I had a federal extradition warrant from Colorado for possession of heroin, and they like fully executed it. I was like, no way, they're gonna come to Connecticut from that.
So some Colorado cops came to fucking Canaan to get you?
No, one did. One, and then like they used a bunch of Connecticut police.
Wow. I mean, that could be another movie. The road trip of the cop from Colorado to go to Connecticut.
Oh my God, dude.
That's funny. So they take you back?
So no, they didn't. So they put me in Whaley Ave in New Haven, and I was there for a couple weeks. And it was something during that time where I like broke. I mean, you don't get like to see anybody. I had no support. I had a public defender who saw me like one time and was like, "Yeah, you're facing like a lot of jail time." I had overdosed in Vail, and in Colorado, they can apparently at the time, they can just take your blood, and then if there was heroin present in your blood, that's considered possession. They charged me with a felony possession of heroin and illegal use of a controlled substance, which is like the same thing you get if you date rape somebody.
Right.
It's like they just threw the book at me with all these charges that amounted to like double-digit years in prison for fucking overdosing.
Which is probably the best thing that ever happened to you too, which is so funny.
Yeah, it probably was. And that was 2 days in a row. I had overdosed with the same paramedic getting me.
Oh my God. He was like, you? He's like, didn't I deal with you yesterday?
Yeah, man. I went back there 2 years sober and found that guy and took him out for coffee.
What did he say?
He was blown away and like totally psyched.
So like when you, cause like,
so
keep going. I'm sorry.
So I guess, yeah. So I guess the baseline, like whatever happened in Whaley Ave, I remember Tim had told me about this dick in the dirt prayer. Just get like as low as you possibly can as a form of submission and ask for help. And I remember just being in the middle of this pod asking for help. Like, please, something, someone, something. God, I don't understand. I grew up like Unitarian. I'm certainly not religious. But I was like totally open to there being another way or something. I was just so desperate and broken. And that was just after I called my mom for like the 1000th time from a detox or a psych ward or jail. And I was like, this time it's going to be different though. I'm going to get out. I have the sober house. I'm going to be all right. And she said, Dylan, your words speak so loudly. I can't hear or your actions speak so loudly. I can't hear a word you're saying. And I hung up the phone.
Right.
And I was like, fuck. Yeah, it's good, right?
Yeah.
And something, I don't know, dude, something clicked at that. Something in there. It wasn't like a white light experience by any means, but if I look in retrospect, after that, I just started seeking a spiritual solution. Like, it was the only thing that mattered.
And when did it start, like, you feeling it work? You know what I mean? Because, like, I remember, I mean, I was at a meeting this morning, and it was a beginners meeting, and everybody was counting days, and, like, I hadn't been to a meeting like that in a long time. I haven't been around that in a long time, and it made me so grateful to have a little bit of time. And when I talked about my story I shared this morning, and it was like, I just remembered, like, somebody told me they wanted me to come back to the meeting, and how that affected me, and then just kind of crawling back to walking, you know, and not wanting to ever be in a situation like that again, you know. What was it for you? Like, what made it start sticking?
So it was the very beginning. I remember going to Tim's office. He, like, had an open door policy even after we left, and I went there every day, like, hey, I heard you started a big book study, can I do that with you? And he was like, no, sorry, we're full and we're, like, too far. And I went back every day for like 3 days, and finally he let me in. And so the first time I went to that was like this kind of, I didn't feel great, I was riddled with anxiety, but I remember having, like, this feeling that these dudes, Tim and this guy Don that were running it, like, these dudes know what they're talking about, they've been where I am, and I trust that eventually I'll get there. So at that point, it started to feel less like I was sentenced to a lifetime of anxiety and depression, and that, like, maybe, outside shot, I could actually be comfortable. And then over the next couple months, it was like, so when I'm like 2, 3, 4 months, there was like moments. I was also super lucky that I fell into a crowd of guys who took recovery seriously, but were also about having fun and, like, fucking with each other in, like, a healthy way. And so like, at least I could have moments of, like, not feeling completely incarcerated by my emotions, just, like, being with these dudes and hitting a ton of meetings. And then I distinctly remember that summer, so like 6 months, I was working for this couple, managing their estate. They'd moved up from the city, and they just had, like, this massive estate in Connecticut, and my job was to, like, mow the lawn or whatever. And I remember driving the tractor, like, and it started raining, and having, like, this, it was like a warm rain, and it was just this beautiful scenery.
Right.
And for the first time, like, really feeling like, okay, if I work my ass off, this thing can be amazing. I just, like, had an insight that this could be incredible.
Right. That's an amazing thing. You know, like, when you realize that the world can be a decent place to live in, even if you're not high and you're not doing crazy shit. It's an amazing moment. I can even imagine that. It's fucking cool.
Dude.
And
man, and it wasn't great. Like, in my life, I didn't have a cell phone, I didn't have a car, I barely had any money. I was getting picked up and dropped off everywhere. Like, I was using the house phone to call, like, some sponsor. And, like, so, like, externally, my life was in no way, it was probably the worst it had ever been, or pretty close to it. But, like, some things felt, like, real, and I felt like I had a foothold. And then it was just, like, I'm not shy anymore about the fact that, like, me and a couple dudes just, like, we went after recovery so fucking hard, dude. We just, like, it was constant meetings, constant prayer, discussion, meditation, like, reading about 12-step origin, but also a bunch of other stuff and, like, different forms of spirituality. I got super into all that stuff, and Tim's sweat lodges and, like, anything. If I was anything that could possibly make me feel at all better in a healthy way, I was going to try to say yes.
So you, like, when they say you have to go after your recovery, like you went after your drugs, that's actually what you did.
Yeah, I think, yeah, dude, it is.
But there's nothing wrong. I mean, it's like that. I mean, me and Chris, when we started to do Dopey, in the very beginning, we would talk all the time about, like, actualization, you know, being the best, you know, self-actualization being the greatest way to not do drugs, where you have something else to do. And I think for me and Chris, like, Dopey became that thing. But it sounds like, you know, but Chris also pursued recovery in the same way. And, like, and when you get to that sort of sounds like you did it, mind, body, spirit, fucking doing everything you could do to really rocket yourself to that next fucking place. And it sounded like you had some results, no?
Yeah, man, and I don't want to paint the picture that it was perfect. I also, in that first year, I think I gained like 60 pounds.
Right.
It was like ripping like 2 packs of cigs a day and like drinking Monster and Red Bull and Celsius, and like a complete mess in some ways, for sure. But it was like all in pursuit of like my body, my being attractive, or my being healthy, or my like dressing a certain way, or my even owning a car means nothing in the grand scheme here. It means nothing. and like I just like totally forgot about like the gift of patience that like descended upon me in that moment, because I was never able to have that before. It was always like, get back, get the car, get the girl, get the clothes, get whatever, the business. But like the grace to just slow down and realize that I was going to attain nothing unless I first like understood my own emotions and like a greater sense of purpose and some real traction giving philosophies and ideas.
It sounds like an actual spiritual awakening.
Dude, 100%. You too, man.
Yeah, well, for me, it was different, and it was like it kind of seeped into me over time, and with weird things. I mean, like your story, like it sound. I mean, I think it's very cool, and it's exciting to me. Like imagining you, it's like training to be spiritual. It's like training to understand what you need to do to not be the person that you had been. You know. And then you got into the business of it. Did you go immediately into the business of it, or did you do other stuff first?
No, so that job that I worked with one of my best friends, Dan. I'm not sure you've definitely met him. He and
Dan gave the first great criticism of Dopey. He was like, he said, Dopey's really good. It just would be better if it was funnier. Which was fair enough, you know.
That's so good.
Yeah,
dude, he's an amazing person in my life. But so he and I, but he was like this pre-med, young, like scholarly academic genius, and then there was me, and both of us just like totally pushed pause, and we worked at that farm. So it was a 30-acre farm with these two crazy old people who were just super mean to us, and they also had built an addition on their house for stray animals, and so they had 25 stray cats and like somewhere between like 5 and 8 stray dogs that it was now our job to take care of. So every morning we'd go in and just pick up cat and dog shit, feed them, give them medication as we're like listening to speaker tapes or like Eckhart Tolle stuff.
Right.
And then we get the animals straightened out and then go outside and mow or dig holes or do whatever we need to do. We did that for like, God, I think I worked there for 6.5 years. I did that for a long time. I overlapped a little bit. I started working in the industry at like 4 years sober, I think.
What was the first? But you were like working on a fucking farm, and then you were like, what made you realize that you wanted to work in the recovery industry at all?
Man, dude, I don't know. It just kind of happened. So I was like, honestly, I was pretty content with that job, and also they were both getting older, and we started taking care of them medically a little bit, and it was clear they were both going to die
right
soon. So both of us kind of made a pact that like we're going to run this out to support them, even though they were awful to us, but they've been awful to everybody and had no family and no friends, so we were like everything to them. So I was at 4 years, and then somebody approached me at a meeting and was like, hey, would you want to like work for that treatment center I went to? And I almost did it, but it felt like too early. So I said, no, I don't want to do it. That was at like 3 years or something. And then a year later, somebody else offered me like what sounded like a really compelling job in Boston that I could kind of commute to, and I could keep my farm job and do like some case management and crisis intervention and like some stuff that sounded pretty exciting, and that they weren't going to expect too much from me, like as far as like understanding the industry or anything. It was just like, hey, this kid is like just overdosed in Minnesota, and now he's running around fucking the ghetto. Go get him and put him into treatment.
Right.
Which I love that shit. I love that. That's just like,
yeah, I'm sure there's a crazy Dopey episode with that. Just, you know, fucking tracking kids down, doing intervention, all that kind of stuff. But you wound up opening up some residences for people. Like, what? How do you describe your work now? Like, what are you doing?
I mean, that was again totally. So I did that for a little while, case management stuff. That couple, they both died, which was really cool to play that out fully, and like beautiful in a lot of ways. So I took like a year off, and in that time I'd like been working. I worked like 120 hours for 2 weeks straight, or 2 years straight, where I was doing like that intense case management, kind of like sober companion stuff in Boston, and then I'd drive back for 50 hours straight at the farm. And then at that point I like had some money, and I was like, I'm going to buy a 1-bedroom place in Boston or like a place in the Berkshires with like a decent amount of land. So I opted for that. And then I never planned on starting anything necessarily. I moved in Dan, I moved in Alex, and then we had an open room in this local treatment center. I was like, hey, would you we know you do some case management stuff. Could this kid move in? And like,
wow. So it just started like that, supernaturally.
Yeah.
And those guys were your first people.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was the four of us. I mean, it was the three of us. It was me, Dan, and Alex. You know, the whole we moved in with nothing, no furniture, sleeping on the living floor together. Just really cool bootstrapping life. And that's about so close to that is when Chris started to hit me up to move in there. And I was like, dude, no way. Because, he'd relapsed.
Yeah.
In New York.
Yeah. That relapse, I mean, that was for my money, for whatever reason, Chris's relapse in Brooklyn was my favorite relapse story of any story.
With the girl?
Yeah, just the whole thing. Just running that loft place and taking the client's drugs and tripping ecstasy and shooting fucking coke and heroin in the facility. I don't know why, because I remember he brought me to that place. He took me on a double date to that loft. And he also would always call me up when he knew I was sober and ask me if I wanted to trip with him and this and that. But there was just something so comical about him running the place, stealing the kids' drugs, and then fucking getting high among them. I don't know why I thought it was so funny. That was part of the whole origin of Dopey, that I just thought that story was so, or his needle factory story.
That's a good one.
His stories were just so fucking funny to me. Also, just the way he was such an aw shucks innocent type guy, and he would come out with these ridiculous stories, So I guess he had relapsed a bunch of times when he was I have to get back to the source. Right?
Yeah.
And that's when he begged to come live with you guys?
Yeah, so he had called me one night, and I was just walking through fucking some supermarket, and he's like, hey, I ate a bunch of acid. And I'm like, oh, fuck, what? All right, what do you want? What are you doing? Someone asks for help, says that. It's enjoy it, be safe, call me tomorrow. What do you do? And then he's kind of asking me to navigate the discussion he's having with the girl. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, the HPPD with Tina?
Yeah. So he started tripping, yeah, exactly. And then he tells her, actually, I'm not tripping. I'm having a flashback. And then he gets honest and is no, actually, I am tripping. And she's like, no, you're having a flashback.
Yeah.
So Chris calls me and says that, and then the girl calls me and is like, Chris is having a flashback. I don't know what to do. And Chris, I'm switching between lines, and Chris is like, no, dude, I totally ate acid. And she's like, he said, no, but he thinks that because he's having a flashback. That was just a classic Chris. And then someone went down there, and he got a bottle, the whole story, dude. He got a bottle and then jumped out of the car when he got back to Boston, and then kept going for a couple days.
Yeah, that story's so crazy. He loved that story more than any of his stories because it was hallucinogenic, persisting something disorder. And he loved that anachronism or an acronym. Yeah. And there was some end of the story where she made him carry a metal pig across town or something. And,
I don't remember that part.
And he was a pig, and I think he always regretted fucking that relationship up too, by the way.
Really?
I think so. Anyway, fucking you wound up becoming this pillar in this community after having been, as bad as it gets. At what point did you feel I guess when you're doing all that fucking recovery seeking and training, you're feeling the change, right? You're feeling yourself become a different person.
You absolutely are, dude. And it's, I don't know. There was to be so clear, there were fucked up relationships, and so eating is my number two thing. So I'd gain 50 pounds and then lose 50 pounds. And then so it was all over the place. But all the time, I was just obsessed with recovery and spirituality. I just became obsessed with religion, spirituality, and recovery. That was just what I did. And then if you just do that over time, you wind up being the guy that's been around a while. And to be clear, too, like, I am part of a group of people up here that I think is super dynamic, you know? That, like, it's not me. It's like, it was Chris, and it's Colin, and Ryan, and Ted, and Jen, and, like, Alex, and that's the whole thing about it, is that you really can't do it alone. Is that, like, you need to grow up with a community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And when you trace the end, you know, I mean, I can't believe it. I mean, I guess I can, but the end of his life, you know, he went from that, living with you guys, to get, you know, he finished school online, and he got into that program at William James, and he moved back to Boston. Were you scared for him?
I mean, a little bit, but at the same time, like, I'm not scared about you at all right now, you know?
No, I mean, me neither.
Like, it's been a long time, dude. Like, 4 years is a long time. That really... And it was, like, not 4 years of, like, kind of knowing this guy. Like, yeah, I sponsored him, but he also lived in my house for that period, for most of that time. And I saw him every day. Like,
did you know him? Did you know him when he was using it all? Did you know that part of him? Yeah, exactly.
Never.
You know, I think that's I mean, whenever I talk to anybody who was close to that family, then, you know, they always say, well, you didn't know him when he was using, you know, and because he did become an asshole right before he died, like a total asshole. Like, I don't know, how much were you in touch with him at the end of his life?
Less. I mean, so it was, if you remember, I mean, the rough timeline everyone speculates is that it was pretty quick, right? I mean, we're talking a matter of weeks, not months.
Yeah, I think it was 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's like at a max. And, like, I don't know, I was having a crazy summer that time. He had really proven, to me at least, that he was capable of dealing with, like, school and work and the other stuff he was doing for school and the relationship and balancing the family. And he would even be coming out here every other week.
He was working at your house. He was doing Dopey every week. He was doing school. He was in a serious relationship. He had all that stuff going on.
Yeah, so I remember some of the last like deep talks we had. I remember trying to emphasize, like, dude, you're not a hero, and you don't need to be a hero. Like, this has got to be a lot for you.
Say that again.
I was just like, I remember us talking about not feeling like you need to present as some hero.
Right. And what would he say?
You taught me the classic, like, yeah, dude, I know, totally. I need to, like, do more maintenance on my stuff and, like, whatever. You know, the classic kind of, like, in retrospect, like, saying what I wanted to hear. Yeah. But there probably wasn't, it's like, looking back on it, it's probably more clearly, he had a lot of shit going on, dude. He was like, I don't know if he was prepared to go from going online school from his bed watching Star Trek to, like, a really full life, dude. You know that. I mean, he had, like...
Yeah.
When he was living here, he had the luxury to, like, to be going to meetings all the time and to be, like, just doing basically whatever he wanted, you know? And in a community that really accepted him for everything.
Right.
You know?
In that community, he could be the weirdo popping in with a pint of ice cream, sitting down, watching a TV show, and then wandering off and nobody giving a fuck what he had done. You know?
Totally.
Like, and then he went from that to being Brooks Brothers shirts and khaki pants and working in a school and being with a woman in Harvard Medical School and running your program, you know, running your house, coming up to do Dopey, you know, like, and planning on being a doctor. You know, he was convinced that he was gonna, but I think, like, he separated himself from himself. You know, like, it was a weird thing that he did, and we'll never know. And obviously, we both loved Chris like crazy. You know, I remember after he died, at the whatever that place was, where they had the wake, and you just came right up to me, and we had never met, you know, and it was so crazy. Like, it was just so fucking intense. And I mean, like, it wasn't even grief, it was just insanity. Like, I couldn't even believe, like, what, you know what I mean? Like, it was, I hadn't been around any, I mean, Todd had just died, so I was fucking crazy. And Todd was in your house too. He just he showed up there because Chris told him to go there. And and he like begged himself out of that place, and like, you know, his death was like this crazy mystery too, Dylan. Like, you know, they found him naked in his sister's room, and there was not even a dope bag around.
What?
Like, I have a theory about what happened with him, that he did the dope in his car, threw the bags out on the way inside, and died as soon as he got upstairs. That's how Todd was. He did very little bits. But anyway, we're talking about these two deaths that railed you and I right back to back. Did you blame yourself at all as a sponsor or anything? Like, did that come into your head or no? You're too smart.
Yeah, I mean, dude, well, of course, dude. I mean, you can't, like... There's this interesting dynamic I had with Chris, where it's like, he's exactly my little brother's age. And like my little brother, who I'm super close with, love the kid to death, but he lives in South America. He's a music producer. He's like living his life. He's always been the perfect kid, D1 football, like physics degree. But there's something about Chris that just like, that I felt super protective over him. And like, yeah, I think I said it that night too. Like just so proud of him. Because I knew how like virulent his strain of addiction was, and I knew that it wasn't easy, and just like proud of even who he was when he was fucking up, by the way. Like just proud of him just as a human, and I just fucking loved him. So it's hard to pull apart like what is just pain of loss and then what is like my fault. Of course I replayed like if I had done like this or that, like could it have been possibly, of course, dude, but like, I mean, we've now, in this epidemic that's worse than like the Vietnam War, we've all lost. Anybody who's like listening to this, and you, I'm sure, have lost like dozens of people. And I wouldn't even be, if I took ownership of those, dude, I wouldn't even be here.
Of course. So, like, no, of course. It's not even a fair question. It's more like, well, you and I had that conversation, you know, I want to say 4 weeks before he died. You know, like you call, Ryan called me, I called you because Todd had just died, and like we're like preparing for what we have to do, and then Chris, being who he was, he talked us out of it. You know, but it's nuts. And I'm really, really, really glad that you came on the show. You know, like we could go on forever about this kind of stuff, but the truth is, like, you know, you obviously have a ton of people that depend on you in Massachusetts. You have these businesses that are like, you know, that exist because you think in terms of entrepreneurship, but they're really about feeding back into the community. And it's amazing. And I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing this story. It's crazy, you know, isn't it crazy? What a crazy story.
It's so crazy, man. This has been like therapeutic. Also,
has it?
Yeah, for sure, man. It's like cathartic. I don't know. There's some like there's some real shit about grief work that I think that our generation of people that are recovered need to pay attention to. And like talking about it never hurts, man. So
that's funny too. I remember when Chris and I started the show, I think it was in the first episode, we were talking about recovery, and Chris said, dare I say I'm recovered, you know? And I said, you're not recovered. It was funny, but like, you know, like I still, like, I feel recovered, but I could never say it because it scares me, you know?
Yeah.
I can't believe like that story. And then I think about Dopey and the growth of Dopey, and I'm very proud, you know, and I'm very proud to share, your story with Dopey, because we would never have done it without your story. Isn't that weird?
I guess you can see it that way. Yeah, man, thanks. No, I'm proud of you too, and I'm still proud of Chris's like legacy and the fact that it's really endearing to me that it lives on in this way, and that 7 months later, 8 months later, whatever, we're still talking about him, you know, and people are still remembering and thinking about him. It means a lot to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are people all over the world that love him. You know, there are people, I mean, you heard that when we went to the funeral, the priest said that he had never had such a response internationally because Chris was that, he was so fucking endearing and smart and funny, you know? And and it's like I'm super psyched that I got to do this with him, and that he gave me the gift of what I always wanted to do. You want to hear some stupid shit? I'm going to do this. This episode went way longer than I intended, but who cares? There's this guy in Massachusetts, and I always mispronounce this. He calls himself, is it Worcester? What's the part of Massachusetts?
Yeah, Worcester.
So there's a guy, he calls himself Worcester, and he made these segments for Dopey called Chopped and Screwed, where he took like the best stuff, supposedly the best stuff that me and Chris would say, and he would cut it into a thing, right? So I'm going to play one of the segments, and this is it's borderline very homophobic, and he called it the gayest episode ever. So I'm going to play that now. I want to thank you for coming on. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, dude.
All right, I'm going to play it. And you'll hear a lot of Chris, though. I hope you can handle it. Can you handle it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, hold on. But before I even play it, I want to say that me and Chris were just stupid. I love gay people, and I apologize ahead of time for anything that could be perceived as homophobic. When we did the This American Life piece, the woman was like, your show is all fucked up and misogynistic and homophobic and racist, right? And I was like, what? She was like, it's not a politically correct show. Your show is not woke. And which hurt. I didn't even realize. Did you realize that Dopey was so hurtful to people?
No, but I hadn't heard that. I don't know. I'm usually pretty aware.
Yeah, so I'm going to warn you. This is a borderline homophobic tape, and I don't know why I'm playing the homophobic one with you, but what the fuck? It's just happened this way. I hope you can forgive me. You ready?
Worcester.
From Worcester. Yeah, thank you. Hold on. If anybody out there in the Dopey Nation is good at like cutting up audio, why don't you hit us up? We will hand over the Dopey archives to you, and you can create a little audio collage. What? You want to do something with those one-liners?
So this is like a chopped and screwed episode.
So we'll call it the Chopped and Screwed episode. So if anybody's wondering, I'm totally hetero. I'm not a manscaper.
What were you saying about your dick?
That I'm quite happy with my penis size. It just could use a little bit more girth. I took out my flaccid penis and was insecure that it was small.
Shrinking penis syndrome panic.
And one time I was putting the cigarette out and I burned my penis.
Oh, wow.
Have you ever burned your penis?
No.
Imagine like somebody who tortures somebody by putting cigarettes out on somebody's penis. Next thing you know, you're stooping the hooper? What is the thing? Hooping the shooter.
Hooping the shooter.
You're in jail and everything is... I'm just...
Hooping the shooter, Dopey Nation, is sticking a syringe up your butt when your toilets don't flush in prison.
Did you ever pierce your anus with the sharp end of the needle?
I never did. Yeah, I use a needle in jail. It's up many a men's butts.
This Dopey Nation is going to be the butthole drugs episode.
To me, the second you're mayonnaising your asshole to get the dope in there, it's like, with a rectal applicator, it says it's designed.
Okay, what about fucking Toothy Magoo, Tony Baloney?
Yeah,
he comes by and he's
Toothy Magoo. Who is this character?
Tony Baloney.
Because I don't want to stick things in my butt. I mean, what's worse, being the blowjob craftsman or being the anal rapee? I mean, which is the worst trauma? Probably getting fucking slammed in the butt. Tell me, after you get fucked in the ass, is your arse sore?
Oh no, the Canadian homosexuals are going to get upset. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Carnif. Who cares?
I'm worried that there's going to be some random person out there that doesn't like me.
Was that the most homophobic thing I've ever said on Dopey?
You're profiling.
Paolo?
Out of all the gay people we've had on the show, you're going to say something like this?
What gay people?
We've had some gays.
That's not the point. I wish I was gay. I wish I was gay.
At one point in my addiction, I hoped I was gay.
Would you say that was the gayest time of your life? My shots were big and black. What a horrible thing that would have been.
Tell me more about those big black shots.
They were like 12 inches long and yay thick. They could do some damage.
Big Balls Lee.
Big Balls Lee.
Big Balls Lee. Lee, Big Balls Lee, Big Balls Lee, the Big Balls Lee, Big Balls Lee,
Big Balls Lee.
Big Balls Lee, Big Balls Lee, Big Balls Lee, Big Balls Lee, Tyler, and me. Hold your balls up, let your balls drop, and hold your dick. Let your dick drop, turn around, squat, cough. It's about your daddy's dick. In that night, I probably jerked off 9 or 10 times.
In front of him.
In front of him.
And he's
doing the same thing. And he's doing the same thing. And it was so bad the next day that my dick was like raw and like bleeding, you know, like bubble blood through the skin, because I had literally worn off so much skin.
You're like the biggest tease in skinhead gay history. Squirt.org, the hottest gay pickup app in the world. So hot, it's not in the App Store. And it's called Titty Meat.
How's that for synchronicity? That's a little bit better than squirt.
And I want to give a big shout out to our gay Asian listener, Brian Chang.
Brian Chang. Remember the cat shit guy who asked to suck my dick?
Nipple clamps. Oh my God, Chris is so adorable. I'm totally crushing for him. Oh my God.
No flirting, no fucking, no fruiting, no fixing, and no fighting.
I would just like it if fruiting was somehow a homophobic sex term rather than picking fruit.
Did you hear tit face? This says love it, but I just like the thing. It's from tit face.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's like when you get fucked really hard and you enjoy it. Have that ever happened to you before?
That I've gotten fucked really hard and enjoyed it?
Yeah.
No.
Also, Jason, this was easily gayer than the gayest Dopey episode, so congratulations. Dude, even gayer than that, say Toodles. That's the gayest thing in the world.
All right, guys. Toodles.
So what'd you think, Don? It's pretty bad, right?
Oh, man, dude.
It's like you have to I apologize to anybody who is offended by that. It's more of a testimony to mine and Chris's idiocy than our homophobia. And I would never have put this thing together. We have to blame Worcester. But it is, and also the part where I say the thing about anal rape, it's because Chris, it was actually me and Linda had just bought this house, and we hadn't moved any furniture into it. And me and Chris hadn't recorded in a while. It was actually right when Chris and Annie had come back from Anguilla after that probable injury, right? He had just come home, and we hadn't recorded. We had run out of shows, and me and Linda had just had the baby. We had an infant, and we had just bought this house. And Chris drove to the house to record, and it was me and him in the house with no furniture. And we set up the computer to record on the floor in our living room, and we're lying on the floor, and he says to me, if you had to either get raped with anal sex or give a blowjob until the guy comes, which would you do? You know? And that was that whole conversation. You know, and I didn't realize that it would become this spun out homophobic story. But I have to say that when we were recording that, we recorded 3 episodes, I think, that night. And it was the last time I hung out with Chris where he wasn't high. Or if he was in that really euphoric place. We just had the best time. We drove around my town looking for dark chocolate, and we couldn't find it. And we recorded a bunch of episodes, and it was just it was a really, really beautiful time, you know. And that's why I love that stupid gayer than the gayest Dopey Worcester bit, because it reminds me of that.
Dude, I get it, man. I get it.
I hope it didn't offend you.
It did not offend me. And
I apologize to anybody out there that was offended. But Dylan, before you go, I'm going to read you a review. We'll call it the Dopey Review of the Week. And it says, helpful for those who love addicts too. I've been listening, and this is by Marf Memeing, and it was written, I don't know, yesterday. And he said, he gives 5 stars, and he says, I've been listening to this every day as I catch up. Each episode gives me some bit of insight into what my husband may have been going through. Though not an addict myself, hearing people's stories of their dark times as well as recovery makes me feel not alone as we struggle through this together. I cried hard during Chris's last episodes because I truly felt I knew him by spending so much time with his story. Dave, I am so pleased with how you are carrying it on, and the podcast is growing. My husband wrote with you when he was still in his secretive phase. Oh, yeah, he wrote an email. And I am forever grateful for you and Chris. Isn't that beautiful?
Dude, that's so awesome, man.
And
that's real.
Yeah, and if you guys don't remember, Dylan came on the show a long time ago when me and Chris were actually at a hotel when you called in the first time. But the second time, it was after Chris died, and you wrote an amazing eulogy to Chris, and you read it on the show, and it really affected a lot of people. And I appreciate that, and I know that you were of great service to Chris's family, and I know how much they love you, and I know how much service you were of to Chris. And I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on the show. I really do.
Dave, I appreciate your support of him too, and your letting out that side of him that needed to come out with Dopey. I appreciate that.
I appreciate that too. I think we should end on that note, and we'll say, stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris. You want to say goodbye? You said toodles for Chris. What did you think of Toodles before we go? Did you like it?
I loved it because it pissed you off, and it was so clear that it wasn't Chris's thing, other than annoying you. I think. Am I right in that?
I don't know. I think when he found out that it annoyed me, it was the greatest thing that could have ever happened for him.
Yeah, and that's who he is. That's his thing. That's his deal.
Yeah. All right, Dylan. Thanks, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
All right, man. Love you guys.
Love you too.
Later, bud.
Later.
I want to take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And I want to take a ride up in the sky. Watch this aeroplane just pass me by. And I want to see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And my shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. Shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. And I wonder would they pay it any mind when I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it winds, because peace and love are very, very, very hard